Hello, today I'm going to show you how you can get judgmental with models in Oumi. And what I mean by that is how you can use large language models as a judge. So before I hop into things, I'm just going to give you a quick rundown of how exactly you can use the large language model judge feature if you're unfamiliar with it. Because this is a concept that is reasonably common and well used, but I think some folks are not familiar in exactly how you can leverage this. So using a large language model as a judge means you'll have one dedicated LLM that acts as an arbiter for whatever requests and whatever features or dimensions we want to actually assess. So you're going to give this judge a conversation in some way, shape, or form, usually for these chat models, and it will assess it against custom dimensions that we can define. So this is primarily useful for examples like model evaluation, where you want to address model outputs in some specific dimension, maybe like helpfulness, safety, things like that, or any custom evaluations you have. These judges are customizable, so perhaps you want to actually evaluate your judges against different dimensions that you have customized or that are suitable to the data set you're training on, or perhaps different parts of the industry that you care about. Maybe you're in a regulated industry and you care about how drift in certain directions and certain dimensions. You can monitor that using a large language model as a judge. But more than that, you can use large language models for dataset filtering. For example, maybe you want to take a look at your dataset and strip out all examples that mention a certain word or that talk about a certain subject. This can be useful for, obviously stripping them out of your dataset, or even actually taking a deep dive into your dataset and learning a little bit more. Maybe taking a look at the distribution of topics within your dataset. So you can use a judge to label those, or just understanding better exactly the dichotomy of how your dataset breaks down. As I mentioned, quality assurance is one piece. I touched on this briefly before, but I want to reiterate it. When you're actually using a large language model as a judge, you can make sure that not only is it like working for regulated industries, but also that you can make sure the model output stays consistent over time. Perhaps you have a model deployed in production and you're concerned about the model's output changing, or maybe users' behaviors are changing. You can actually detect this by having a large language model as a judge deployed, checking to see if there's any drift in your data over time. Perhaps the user's requests are changing, or your model's responses are changing. And of course, the last piece is comparing models. You can use a large language model as a judge to evaluate multiple models via conversation format, and use different judges to see how the bias exists in each of these models. So all that said, that was a long introduction. I'm going to hope to keep the actual coding and command line interface piece short today. So let's hop into it. So to get us started, I'm going to show you, just as always, what the command line interface for Oumi's Judge API looks like. So let's go ahead and pop open. It's going to be Oumi Judge help, and you'll notice this comes in 3 different pieces. Specifically, you can judge conversations, you can judge a data set, and you can judge a model. So we'll go through these quickly in turn, and we'll take a look at what they do. So for judging a conversation, you can choose a judge, and again, a judge for Oumi is going to specify both a model as well as different criteria that it's going to judge upon. So let's go ahead and take a look at that first. So let me grab conversations, and let's go Oumi Judge. Oops, if I can spell. Conversations, and let's take a look at what's required there for an input. So the input that's required is a judge configuration. Today we're going to use one of our pre-configured judges. I believe this judge is going to be a local version of Qwen. And actually we can check that before I get started. But that aside, you need to also supply an input file, and it's recommended to have an output file so you can save the source of your judgments. What I'm going to use today is I'm going to use a similar dataset to what I use for bulk infer for actually doing judgments. This is going to be part of the Alpaca Clean dataset. I have the first few examples here just saved as conversations that we can use. This is just a simple QA. We have questions and answers, and our judge is going to evaluate on a few criterion. Now the judge I'm going to use today is actually going to be the local XML judge. This is a quantized version of our judge, and I'll show you which one I'm going to use. Specifically, we're going to be using this guy here, Oumi v1 XML local. So this is going to be a local judge that's using a GGUF of a model. It's going to be Qwen 2.0, 0.5b GGUF. So let's hop into things then. Let me pop back open our terminal so we can see what we're doing. And let's just run a judgment on our conversations. So this is going to be Oumi Judge conversations, and we're going to tag our config. In this case, our config is going to be the name of our judge, which is going to be that v1 XML judge. And then we need our input file. So input file, let's go ahead and grab that real quick. I have this already pre-created for us. That guy is right about here, I think. There we go, judges. Okay. We'll load up our conversations, get that path copied, and we're good to go. Okay, so we're also going to output our result here. So we're going to say our output file, we'll just call this our judged convo.jsonl. And we should be off to the races. So what's going to happen here is we're going to actually load the file that we want to, We're going to load the file that we want to judge, the conversations that we want to judge from the file. We're going to download the appropriate model, and we're going to run inference on it. You can see each of these bars is actually running inference on a different attribute that this judge is evaluating. And we'll take a look at those attributes here in a second as soon as it's done. Each of the pre-configured judges in Oumi have some default attributes that are quite useful in general for investigating datasets. So we'll talk through those and show you what's available out of the box. All right, and our last set attribute being queried, and we are good to go. Okay, our results were saved here. And now I've written a small Python script just to visualize things. Right now they're saved as JSON-Ls, and JSON-Ls are not the best to visualize, at least natively in VS Code. So let's go ahead and pop up in Python. I'm just going to import the library I wrote, and we're just going to visualize this file. So what this is going to do is it's going to go through line by line in a JSON-L and show us the results of our judgment. So here we can see the result of our judgment. It's just a dictionary or a JSON file, and it's broken down by the actual dimension that was judged. Let me zoom in here just so we can see a hair better. Okay, great. So what we can see here is our first key is going to be our first dimension, which is the helpfulness dimension. We also evaluate honesty and if the request is safe in this case. So we can see that we get some fields back. We see the raw judgment. This is just the response, including the chat template. Of course, the chat template's parsed, and we can get a decision. This is a Boolean judgment, so we're saying yes, it was helpful, or no, it wasn't. And we get the actual judgment as well as the response from our judge. So if we look at that, we can see the response is helpful because it provides 3 tips for staying healthy. Great. Honest, we can see that yes, the response was honest, and we can go through a few of these to see if our judge gets different results. Our next one, of course, looks like yes, the response was helpful, factually correct, etc., etc. We're going to go through a few until we start seeing some deviations here, which we should expect, I think, in the latter half. Here we go, as an example. So here we're saying the response is helpful because it identifies the odd one out. I think this is a multiple choice question, if I recall correctly. This one says in terms of honesty, it says the response is incorrect, so it's not honest, because it incorrectly identifies Twitter as the odd one out. So I guess it's saying that the response is incorrect. I actually don't know if that's true. I'd have to look at the data set, but here the judge has triggered, for at least for honesty, because it thinks it is not honest. It's being helpful, but it's not being honest. Similarly, we see another one for our next field, raw judgment for honesty. Response is incorrect. Oh, and here's a hallucination. It's incorrect because it incorrectly states that the fraction 4/16 is equivalent to 1/4, when in fact it is not. Well, I regret to inform you that it is indeed equal to 1/4. So that said, this is a very good example of where you need to choose the appropriate large language model as a judge. Here I'm using a very small GGUF of a model, so it's expected to have some issues like this. But you can see that we can get different judgments, in this case a Boolean judgment, yes or no, for each of the lines of our data set. And I'm just going to quickly step through the rest that we have here. Great. Okay, so that was a very lightning fast overview of how we can do judgments on conversations, and we can actually do the exact same thing on datasets. So if we recall, there are the 3 APIs. It was the conversation judgment, the model judgments, and the dataset judgments. So we'll go to datasets next. So Oumi Judge datasets or dataset, and we'll take a look at that here. We can see that what's required in this case is going to be again, the name of the judge we're going to use, our configuration, and then we need to specify the data set we want to use, any dataset splits, and the output file for storing our parsed data set. Now, what I'm going to actually do here is I'm going to kick off a job. I'm going to stop it because I don't have a small enough data set offhand, or I didn't prepare one for this tutorial, but you'll get a demonstration of exactly how it works. The output format is going to be exactly the same as if you were loading a conversation locally, as I did in the first step, but it's going to iterate through a whole data set and download it first. So this is useful if you already have a data set you know you want to filter, or you even want to investigate, as I mentioned before. It's a good way to go. You can use a custom judge to take a look at different dimensions within the dataset programmatically. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started here. We're going to go Oumi Judge dataset. We need to specify our judge, which was the Oumi, let's see, it was V1 XML judge, if I recall. And in this case, we need a dataset. So I'm going to use the same dataset that I actually used for generating my conversations, just for simplicity. And in this case, that was the Yama alpaca clean dataset. And output file, we'll just say, is going to be our judged alpaca.jsonl. Now, you'll notice there's a few fields I'm omitting, such as the subset and the split. These have default values. In this case, we'll default to the train split, and the subset I'm not going to specify. So let's give that a whirl. And like I mentioned, of course, I don't have any typos. This will start running, but I'm not going to run it all the way through because the dataset's going to take a little too long for this video. Oops, I typoed my config. And this is why we use copy and paste. So let's go ahead and fix that guy up. Let's see, what is wrong with my config? Well, we'll just copy and paste and see. Oh, I typed the word judge instead of local, that's why. Okay, let's give it a try again. All right, perfect. So we've downloaded our data set. You can see that here that we have 52,000 examples. And just as we did in the first part, we're going to now load our model and run inference. This is going to have to run across all the dimensions we had previously. And you can see it's chugging along. This one dimension, for example, is going to take us about 3 minutes. For the purpose of this video, I don't need to run through that again. You'll see the output format is going to be exactly the same as what we did in the first part, where we were actually evaluating, the conversations that we had. This will be exactly the same. Each instance will be a judgment and will be in order of the data set. So I'm going to kill this guy. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you the very last piece we have. This is going to be the judgments for models. This is where you can actually judge the output of a model on a conversation. So this is helpful when you want to see how different models perform or the dimensionality of certain models. Perhaps you want to have a judge or an arbiter that's going to take a look and ensure that your model is standard across certain dimensions like safety or whatnot. There's very similar tools that do this as well. If you want to do this at scale, like prompt foo, this is a good way to do this in your machine learning workflow here as well, just via the Oumi command line interface. So let's go ahead and do that. So what we're going to do here is we're going to run our, well, let me show you the command first. It's Oumi Judge model, and we can take a look at what's required. So in this case, it's very similar. We need to specify the actual judge we want to use. And the one difference here is now we need an inference configuration. And this is going to be the model that's going to be completing the conversations that will judge. So we provide an input file with conversations, a model to respond to those conversations, and then a judge to actually judge the model's response on those conversations. So let's go ahead and give it a try. So the first thing I'm going to need to do is actually find an inference config to use, and I'm just going to use small m, so we'll grab this guy here, and then let's go ahead and run things. So Oumi Judge model, specify the model name. Let's see if I can do this without typoing this time. V1 XML, and it's local, not judge. And our inference config, let's see, that's going to be this guy we just copied. And we should be good to go. Let's see, I believe I also need the input path. So input, let's see, was it input path? I think so. It was our input file. And our input file here is going to actually be this guy I had before. Let's copy that guy. And then let's do our output path. Output file. This is going to be, we'll call this judged model.jsonl. And let's kick it off. Okay, perfect. So previously we loaded our conversations and loaded our model and ran the judgments. Now we have to do a few extra things. We have to load our conversations. We have to load the model we're going to judge, run inference on that model. Then it's going to take the results of that model's inference and run them through our large language model as a judge. So you can kind of see the loop here. We've had conversations. We added an extra turn onto that conversation using this model. Then we're going to send the new final conversations to our large language model as a judge and evaluate that entire conversation or rather the model's final response in that conversation on the dimensionality of our judge. So I believe we have 1 or 2 dimensions left, and we'll walk through them, and we can see exactly how this turns out. All right, we should be good to go. So once again, I'm going to use my Python script to visualize this. And we'll do viz.viz, and our name was, judged model.jsonl. All right, and we can see we have the exact same set of conversations as we expected, with judgments once again coming from our specified judge. This is once again the helpful, honest, and safe dimensions. So if I go through, I think our judgments should be pretty similar the whole way through. I don't think small m is going to, well, small m may trigger a few extra honesty violations would be my guess, just since small m is not the best. It is a very small model. Here's an example we can see. This actually is a fact where there was no judgment provided. This is interesting. So we can see the judgment is null. We can take a look why. So for honesty, we see our raw judgment. The judge is factually correct, but it could be improved by providing more specific suggestions, etc., for example. So we give examples, but our chat template is not properly formatted, so we don't actually see the result of our judgment. Fair enough. Great, and we can see for other fields as we go through. Here in our case, our judge is actually answering the question. But again, this is a small model, so this can be expected. Larger models obviously will do much better in this case. Okay, so that's all I wanted to show you for the large language models as a judge. There's much more on our documentation, which I will pop over here. You can see here. In our documentation, we talk about how to use our judges, which I covered briefly at the beginning of this video, but also specifically how you can build your own judges and what the built-in judges do. We have various judges. The one I demonstrated today, I just did locally using, a quantized model, so I didn't have to spend any money on API credits. But if you have API credits to spend, you can use any remote model you'd like as well, be it DeepSeek, R1, OpenAI's, any model from OpenAI, I should say specifically, Claude, Sonnet, Claude 3.7. The world is your oyster in terms of actually using a large language model as a judge. So do check out the documentation. Again, this is oumi.ai/docs. There's information if you want to specifically add your own custom dimensions for judges, or you can use what we have out of the box. So that's been it for me. And in the meantime, and until next time, happy tuning.